You are listening to one of the very earliest broadcasts of the Giant Steps podcast. I am your host, Doug Van Dorn, and with me is my cohort in crime, Mr. Rudy Landa.
We're also seen, not just heard.
We are also seen and not just
That's
heard.
right.
That is correct.
That's right.
Trying out a new platform as we experiment with different ways of getting this podcast underway. And today we're going to be talking to a longtime friend of mine who contacted me about 2 weeks ago to tell me a story. He said, I got to tell you the story, a supernatural, weird story. And he actually wanted to go on another podcast. And I said, hey, man, I'm starting a podcast myself. Why don't you come and do it on mine? And so he said, I'd love to do that. I'd love to do that.
So he's making his debut as well.
He is making his debut as well. Yep.
That's right.
Yep.
Well, let's bring in, and his name is?
His name is Malachi.
That's a cool name. Let's bring him in.
It's an awesome name.
I was teased so bad as a kid. I mean, it was bad.
Mr. Malachi Martin. Oh, I mean, Malachi Sewel.
Man, I love Martin. He's great.
I know. We got to talk about him a little bit at some point today, I suppose.
Definitely.
He overlaps with what we're doing. So,
yeah.
Malachi and I met, it's been a long time ago, 15, maybe 20 years ago.
About somewhere around there.
I think my recollection is that we were on, this is after the AOL chat days. And I started getting on this program called Pal Talk, and we go in these chat rooms, and you couldn't believe it because you could actually talk to somebody live over the internet.
Right. It
So
wasn't
I think
just a
that's where we met.
discussion board. You had to wait, 3 hours for somebody to respond. You could actually do it live. It was amazing.
It was an amazing thing. Yep. So Malachi, I would like for you to tell people a little bit about your story, who you are, where you're from. And also I'd like to have you tell, about your family and also how you met your wife, because it's a great story.
Sure. Let me try to remember everything. I'm getting up there in age, so I'll try to remember all the details. I am a military vet. I spent a lot of time, or I'm a military brat. That's where I really started. So I was, born, parents in the military, moved around everywhere. I went to like 15, 20 schools. I stopped counting after a while, and spent time overseas in the Far East and Philippines and Okinawa. And that was pretty much my childhood, just moving around. We were believers, so we would go to church to church to church as we'd move around. So I have a really good experience in a whole wide swath of different churches. And when I was at, my late teens, I was like, I can't work at a video arcade my whole life. So I guess I better join the military. And for me, it was just like going home. It's like, this is my groove. And so I joined, and I started out as an Arabic linguist, and I cross-trained into psychiatry, so a mental health technician. And it was a unique opportunity because during that time, the military, the Air Force, did have some inpatient units. I had about 3 of them across the nation. And Keesler Air Force Base is where I was stationed. It was one of those inpatient units. So that's and that was, and I got out about 2003. Y'all still hear me? Because I hear okay. So that was about 2003 is when I got out. I met my wife in 2004, and pretty rapid development as far as our relationship. We went from meeting each other in October of 2004 to proposing in November 2004 and marrying in December 2004. So pretty quick.
You don't waste time.
Yeah, I know, right?
Don't mess around.
All right. There were interesting circumstances. So I had been previously married, and my wife at the time, she kind of fell away from Christ, and we tried to, go to the pastor, get everything working. It just, for her, just wouldn't work. So she divorced me, and at this point I was like, okay, I out of the military. I don't have any children. I'm single now. I'm just going to be a hermit and be, like, take on some monastic order, be a priest my whole life or something. I'd resign myself. Okay, no more. I'm not a family guy, and you know, and boy, did the Lord have different plans. So, um, it was in about it was 1999 when I was still in the military that um, I had made an adult uh, profession of faith, and uh, I don't think, growing up growing up as a kid in the church, you don't understand. You understand forgiveness. You understand grace. You do that, but once you leave, get on your own, and look at your life, and you're like, wow, I'm not living how I should. This is not who I am, and the Lord just just came into my life in a very undeniable way, and it changed my heart. And um, I'd say about 2 years after that, there was I was actually right here on the Gulf Coast of Mississippi, and there was a concert, an evangelistic concert, and they had some praise and worship music. So me and all my friends and my wife at the time, we went out to this concert. It was on the green. It was outdoors. It was really nice. And after the music, the minister came up. He's an evangelist, and before he gave his gospel presentation, did a really good job at it. And then he looked at the crowd and he asked, "Is there anybody here who feels led to the ministry?" And and everybody looked at me like, "If you don't raise your hand, then then we're going to force you up there." So I raised my hand reluctantly. I'm not good on stage, right? So raised my hand. So he calls me up there, and he we pray. He says, "So what's preventing you from joining right now?" I says, "Well, I'm in the military, and I'm in my enlistment, and I can't just up and leave." So he said, "Well, okay, let's pray about that." So we pray, and he says, uh, "The Lord told me that you're gonna have a small window of opportunity to get out of the military. That this is what the Lord wants for you, and that you will be tempted for a very large amount of money to stay in, but don't do it. Get out." Uh, he says, "You and your wife, you will. There'll be many souls saved, and you and your wife will cast out demons and all these things." And at the time, I'm like, "Okay, I'll take it, sure." And then fast forward, in 2003, I'm up for my reenlistment. A lot of life happened, and we fell apart. There was a miscarriage, and there was just it was just very rough for us, and we hadn't gone to church in probably a year at that point. And I was like, I think I want to reenlist, but I want to go into computers because I have a really high um, recruitment bonus with that. So I sign up for it, and sure enough, the recruitment bonus is like $40,000 for a sign on. I was like, wow, that's more money I've ever had in my life. And so I'm sitting there. I went ahead and signed the reenlistment papers. And at the time I was working, I had my own office, and I was at work. And it was about 2 days before I could renege on that and roll that back and cancel my reenlistment. And I'm sitting there. And then suddenly I was by myself. It was after hours. Suddenly the room felt like it took on about 30 tons. It just felt so heavy. And there was no one in the room with me, but I couldn't help but feel like I need to just get down, get low. And then this voice speaks, and it not audibly. And I'm in mental health. I know what that means, right? But but not audibly. Just this resonates, and there's this voice, and it says, "You know what I told you to do." And then I got all these excuses came to my mind. Like, I don't know, how would I provide for my family? How would I do this? And then with every single excuse that came to mind, the Lord just spoke a verse. Who made the lilies of the valley? How who clothed them? Who fed the birds of the air? And I soon realized I'm not going to win this argument. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to do it. And so I hop up, I go over there, and they basically tear up my reenlistment. And then I have to go break the news to my wife at the time, who we had already spent all this money in our heads, and so that was not the answer she was wanting to hear. That wasn't good news for her. So I think that might have been one of the things that caused her to just kind of walk away. But anyway, I get out of the military, and it's about a year afterwards. I'm working at an inpatient unit in Mississippi here. I had resigned myself at this point, like, I'm just going to be single my whole life and just dedicate myself to Christ. And
no,
I get a phone call from I was working. There's two sections. There was a substance abuse section, and then we had our psychiatric unit. And I was in the substance abuse. And the psychiatric nurse, she gave me a call. She says, "Hey, can you come over here? We just had this patient come in, and I really think you should come and talk to her." So I said, "Okay, sure." So I go over, and there's this poor girl sitting in the day room, and this is about 10 o'clock at night, and I hear her story, and it's this really sad story about how she was in the military as well. She left. Her fiance broke it off with her, and she had attempted suicide. But she said, she just gave me this amazing story. She says, but when I was there, she said, I should have been dead, but I was laying there and I just came back to life. And she said, she told me the tale of these two nurses that were taking care of her. One was an atheist and the other one was a believer. And this atheist nurse just kind of felt really bad for her. She was in a coma at the time. And he's like, correct. She did. I mean, her heart stopped like twice. So she had a medical background, so she knew exactly what to take. So there was a lot of medication she was on, and she was also when you look at like VA psychiatric and psych treatment, it's not that's not the best, and there's not very good
So how did she?
So they were prescribing her.
So you said that she
that
tried to
could
commit
also
suicide.
induce,
How did she do that?
psychotic episodes.
Her heart.
Just
So
a
how did
mix
she
of
do
those
that then?
things. And so that's effectively what she was kind of a victim of that.
Oh wow.
And anyway, she took all these. We're talking like enough medication to probably kill about 10 people. And whenever she was discovered, she was out of it, and the ambulance just so happened to be on the street, and it's a pretty remote street. It just so happened to be driving by whenever they got the call. They were literally right there at the address, so that freaked them out. They take her. Her heart stopped 2 or 3 times. They brought her back, put her in the intensive care unit, and flushed her system. And they would, for about a week or so, she was just unresponsive. They had her intubated, and these two nurses would, they would take care of her at night, and they would put things on. She loves LSU football, so they would put on old games for her so she could maybe hear it. Really wonderful guys. And this one guy, like he was an atheist, and he was giving her washing her hair with the nozzle, and he's basically like, God, I don't believe in you, but if there's anybody, if you're real, this poor girl doesn't deserve this, And right when he's doing that, her eyes popped open and he almost fell backwards.
Wow.
And she's like, it's hot. She's like, oh, and they took it out, and she was complaining because of how hot the water was, and this is on the heels of that her grandparents' church had the elders come and lay hands on her and anoint her, and it was that next morning that all this happened. And so he's now a believer. This nurse that was working. Um, so this is the girl that shows up in my day room, and I'm talking to her. She tells me this amazing story. She says, I couldn't even do this properly, and I was struggling there. I was talking to God while she was in the hospital, and he just shows up, in my room, and very similar to what I had experienced. And he just communicated how much he loves her and how he has something for her to do. There's a plan on her life.
So
And
her ministry started while she was unconscious.
that's right. Before she even knew it, right? And so she was just so full of life. You meet someone who has just had that transformative encounter with Christ, and I saw her, and here I was, this jaded divorcee, and it just kind of renewed it. He's just I'm like, wow, the Lord is so faithful. He knows what he's doing. And so she had no support system, and so I said, hey, look, whenever you get out, I'm going to be your friend. You have no one here. We went to the same college, this local college, and said, so count yourself. You have somebody on your corner. And so I just had this burden in my heart for her. I would pray for her and visit her. And then she got transferred to the state hospital, namely because they needed to make sure that the medical side was good, that she wouldn't have any seizures, because she shouldn't have been alive. So they had to make sure her liver was functioning based on everything she took. So she was transferred up there. I didn't know that, and so I came in, and she had been transferred. I was like, okay, all right, I guess that's that. I'll just continue to pray for this poor girl, as I just as the Lord leads me. And then then I get off of work, and the Lord, yeah, he just impresses on me, no, you need to go visit her. And he brought up the passages. Look, you're not just supposed to pray for her. You go visit this person. And I was like, okay, I'm tired, but right off the night shift, but I'll do it. So I hop in my car and I travel to Jackson, Mississippi. It's about 4 hours north. And I get there. I have no idea. This is before. Man, this is 2000, the fall of 2004. So there was no GPS. There was none of this stuff. At least not on. And I didn't have a smartphone or anything.
Right.
Like that, right. And so I'm getting there, and I'm relying on the kindness of strangers to kind of point me in the right direction. Like, hey, where's the state hospital up here? And everybody's pointing me, and I get to the only place I could find is this medical hospital, and it doesn't have any psych units or anything like that. So I was like, I know this can't be it. This is not where we do transfers. So I was like, okay, I have gone above and beyond here. I'm just gonna turn around and go home. I've done my due diligence. I think I've satisfied that, and so I was so deep in Jackson, I tried to find my way out. So I had to ask people, hey, how do I get out of here? And I go to this, I'm just meandering, I'm just randomly have an idea of where the interstate was. And okay, if I turn right here, I might get there. So I arrive at this gas station, ask them where the interstate is. And they're like, okay, man, you just take a ride down this road and you'll see the exit. I'm like, okay, good. And then as I'm walking out, the Lord puts on my heart. He goes, go ask that man right there. And there's this guy in these overalls. He looked like just this stereotypical Mississippi farmer. And I said, sir, do you happen to know where the state hospital is? And he goes, which one? I'm like, what do you mean, which one? He goes, well, we have the medical one, but we also have the psychiatric one. And I was like, we're like, what do you mean? There's a second one? He goes, oh yeah. And I said, well, where is that one? And he said, well, it's right here. You're literally right. You're right here. And he points to it. And it's across the street from where I found myself. So I just so happened to unknowingly find myself right where the Lord wanted me to be, unknowingly, unwittingly. And so I go there, and I go to the guard says, well, you have to go to the visitor center. And so I go to the visitor center. knowing coming from an psych background, I know you can't just walk into one of these places. There has to be forms you have to fill out and all that. Yeah, and permissions and whatnot. So I go there, and she's like, okay, we can't let anyone in that isn't on a authorization form that the patient gives permission for. And I'm like, well, okay, She says, so what's your name? And so I'm Malachi Sewel, and what's the name of the patient? And I give her the name of the patient. And so she goes back to her little file cabinet, sees her, pulls out this piece of paper, and I see her reading it, going down the list. She goes, oh, here you are. And I was like, oh, okay. So she gives me this visitor's pass. Then I go over to her ward that she's at, and we have a great conversation and I encourage her and all that. I asked her, I was like, she's like, she was so surprised to see me. And I was like, well, I was so surprised again. How did you know to put my name on that list? She goes, I never put your name on the list. I didn't even know what your last name was, And I was like, whoa. And so at this point, we're kind of objectively looking at this. Why would all these things happen? Like, what is the Lord doing here? So we realized that even though both of us were not in the hat for any kind of romantic, we were both romantically bankrupt. We have to respect whatever it is the Lord's doing here. We need to maintain, so we would write letters back and forth just to encourage each other in the faith. And from that, it blossomed, and we set the date 4 weeks later, and we got married 4 weeks after that. And that's pretty much our story. But it doesn't end there because one of the things that this man, whenever we were praying back when I was in the military, one of the things, because everything he said came 100% true, except for the fact that he said, well, you and your wife, many souls will come to the faith because of you, and you will be casting out demons. And I'm like, well, I'm divorced. My wife at the time when he said that, she's not my wife. And so I remember telling Crystal, my wife now, these things when we first met, and then she got a little freaked out. She's like, well, what if it's me? What if, she's like, I'm not cut out for that. And so she starts asking me all these things. Well, what's a demon? I'm like, what is, like, what is all these things? And I gave her, I had an experience working inpatient with someone that we had this demonic encounter. And so I explained this to her, and I'll tell you later on this. I'll tell that story in a minute, but I did. I relayed this to her, and she's like, "Oh yeah, this is not, that's scary stuff. I don't want to be involved in that." But she kept asking questions about it, and like, well, what do I do if I find myself in this? What do I do then? So what we didn't realize is all that was prep for 7 days after we were married. I had my second encounter, and this would be her first. So all that thing was prep for her, and so that'll be the second story I say. I don't want to jump to that one either. But that's pretty much. And then we get married. We have 5 beautiful girls, and here we are.
Right. I know you put our 2 families together, and we almost have a whole football team of girls.
That's right. That's right.
So in other words, neither of you guys get any bathroom time.
No.
Right.
No.
The only way you get that is you have to have your own bathroom, man.
Pretty much.
Yeah. Have some woods out back. That's
exactly.
In case of emergency.
Right.
Well, I love this story. And it's related. Obviously, you've had a good little segue for us to go to the next part of this, but I just love the fact that ordinary people can have these extraordinary stories.
Absolutely.
And I really think that we're a culture right now that needs to hear more of that kind of stuff. Ordinary people with extraordinary stories. And Malachi, you've been one of my favorite people in the world for a long time. I mean,
vice versa, brother.
We don't communicate as much as we probably should, but we do it kind of from afar, and
sure.
And we just have so many common interests, and I hope to get into that here a little bit when we after you tell your stories, just have a little discussion about them
Absolutely.
from our own perspective. But yeah, why don't you? So you had contacted me just 2 weeks ago to tell me that, hey man, I got a couple of these demon stories, and I'd like to tell them to somebody. And you had your idea of where you wanted to do it, and I said, hey man, I'm starting a podcast.
Yeah. I mean, look at that.
Do it on mine. Do it on mine.
Right. Serendipity. Right.
It would be perfect. So
And
why
Doug, I
don't
feel we're ironing out the kinks here. I feel like you need to be over here, Doug. So I'm going to do that. I feel better, a little better about that.
I'm flipping up and
All right,
down.
sorry.
So
You are.
You're so humble,
Hopefully we settle there. All right, we'll settle there.
So why don't you jump into this first demon story that you just alluded to, and
Sure.
tell us about what in the world happened. So I know this story because you told me on the
Yeah.
phone last week, and then
Right.
when you started into the second one, I said, "Don't tell me because I want to be surprised about it." So
Sure thing. So it was in, I'm trying to think. It was probably in the fall of 2001. I'm working on the psych unit in the Air Force. And we have this patient come in who's in his early 20s. And he is facing some criminal charges for being busted with marijuana. At the time, it was very, very illegal. It still is in the military, but not so much. But back then, it was a big deal, and he did very distraught from the criminal charges. It would have meant he had to end his Air Force career, and he had nowhere to go. He grew up in the foster care system, and abused as a kid, and all this really terrible childhood. So he had developed some suicidal ideation, like, man, if you're going to kick me out, I'm just going to hurt myself. And so that's how he ended up on our unit. He was a model patient. He did everything he needed to. He was kind. He was courteous. He was, he's just all around a good natured fellow. And so, I was building rapport with him. And one week I had to go I had to take leave. And when I left, we have a different, like a graduated system of like privileges, for patients. Like, if you meet this standard for this long, then you can have a little more freedoms and stuff like that. And he was on the top, so he was very responsible, and he was not an immediate a threat to himself or anyone else. And so I go on leave, and then when I get back, he is on the lowest, so the most restrictive level, and which is the it's called one-to-ones or one-on-ones, which basically means that patient has to have a staff member assigned to them, exclusively, and they have to be within arm's length of this patient at all times. And so I'm walking back in to the unit, and I was like, what's going on? And I'm going to call him Jack. It's not his name, obviously, but just to protect him. So I was sitting in the with him in the day room, and I was like, man, what's going on here? And he said, I feel like Satan's going to kill me, or he's out to kill me. I was like, well, what do you mean? Why are you saying this? And he said, well, while you were gone, we went down to the library. I checked out this book on Wicca. He goes, I know that all that stuff's real because I was in the church as a kid. And I did some of the things to try and summon a demon to kill me because I'm not brave enough to do it myself. And so the reason he was put on these restrictions, because he would have these fits of self-harm suddenly, and he would be laughing and smiling while he's doing it, like sticking his fingers in light sockets and stabbing himself with pencils, stuff that never occurred prior to this. And another odd thing that was happening to him is he had this very mysterious bleeding going on. His eyes, his fingernails, his ears, his gums, every orifice of his body would be bleeding. So we would have to take labs on him every single morning and have internal medicine check him out, but they couldn't detect anything wrong with him. He was healthy as a horse.
Okay, so
And
stop there for a minute because when you say this, like, is it just constant bleeding that's coming off of him?
it would be almost in waves. So like he would have to wipe blood from his eye ducts, you know, his tear ducts. I mean, like he'd be smiling, all of a sudden it'll be pink from the blood coming out of his gums. Then his fingernails, you could just see it just coming out of his fingernails, and this is clearly like, well, there's a platelet issue, there's a blood thinning issue, and there was nothing wrong. His blood was 100% fine. And it was really bad. Like his eyes, it was really creepy because he had no whites. They were all just blood red. Not bloodshot, but blood red, like a hematoma in there, you know.
Huh.
Wow.
And it was really crazy. So
I bet.
This is something out of a horror movie, man.
it is. It really is. And he, but again, medically, he was, you know, perfectly fine. They couldn't figure it out. So anyway, back to me talking with him. I'm like, man, what's going on? Everybody's telling me what's happening. I can't believe this kind of change. And he's like, yeah, man, Satan's out to get me. And he was just white as a ghost too. And he really believed it. And I'm a new believer at this point. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, he's kind of out to get everyone, man, you know. And you know, my theology, guys, was so superficial at this point. I haven't learned anything, you know. I just knew Christ and him crucified, which is enough, right? And so I'm like, wishing the best. And so we had to get up, and I was assigned to him on my first day back. Well, bedtime happened, patients going to bed. He was in an isolation room, and basically it would be a single bed room. The door of it, there is no door. It was actually there was opening for a door. His bed would have been laying down in such a way that the hallway where I was sitting, so I was in a chair about 10 feet, 6 to 10 feet behind his bed. His bed was situated with the legs pointing toward the wall and the opening of the door behind his head, right? So he couldn't see me, you know. He was laying there, and what I would have to do is every 15 minutes document what he's doing, whether it be asleep, up going to the bathroom, whatever the case. We'd have to document that in that one-on-one relationship. So I'm doing this, and I just have my clipboard. That's the only thing I have: my clipboard and my pen. That's you know, and the Lord just presses on me. He's like, you really need to pray for him. And I'm like, okay, I'm not good at this. I'm new. So my prayers were not eloquent. They were not, you know, verbose at all. They were just like, Lord, please help this fella, you know. But I had a deep compassion for him and sympathy that what he was going through. And that's really what was fueling it. You know, just get him out of this. This is a terrible situation he's in. I don't know what's going on with him, but I just pray that you deliver him from this. And as I'm praying, he had been asleep for at least an hour and a half, 2 hours, sound asleep, like snoring. And as I'm doing this, he starts
and so, but how are you praying? Like I
in my
asked
head.
you, are you praying out loud,
again,
or what are you doing?
As a new Christian, I'm not that bold, so my lips are sealed. I look like I'm just sitting there looking at my clipboard. My lips aren't moving. This is purely in my head, right? I'm not giving any indication, you know. And so just in my head, you know, silently I'm praying for him. And as I'm doing that, he's moving around on his bed. And it's like, oh, okay, he's just getting comfortable, right? I'm making all these excuses. But then I just felt that external prompt to pray harder and don't stop. And so that's what I do. And as I continue, he gets more and more violent in his movements. Very like almost like he has you know, epilepsy or something. Just you know, really bad shaking and all that jerking. And at this point, I'm like, okay, what if one of the medications that he's on is he's having a reaction. It's that bad where he's about to like flop out of his bed. It's really bad. So right before I'm just so freaked out, I call the nurse to come over. Um, he he jumps up out of bed and he spins around to look at me, and he just in this really deep guttural voice, he says, "Quit praying for me," really loud. "Quit praying for me." And I wish I could tell you I had this amazing comeback, right? But I died. The only thing I could, I mean, I almost fell back. I almost fainted. The only thing I could squeak out was, well, why would I want to do that, right? And then he said, he is ours. You can't have him. And at this point, I'm like, I'm thoroughly, my heart was in my throat, and so I just didn't say anything and just kept praying, and he fell right back down on his bed, and within like 2 seconds, he was snoring again, and he had a restful sleep throughout the rest of the morning. I did not. I had I was wired. I did not need any coffee that night to get through the night shift. And so immediately I take a break whenever I had some relief come in. I didn't tell anybody this, obviously. Not at least not at work. So I go and I call my mom, who's a believer, and I said, "Mom, this is what happened. Pray for this kid now. Find as many people as you know are believers, have them pray for him. Then any other patients that I know are believers, I would let them know, hey, I'm not going to get into it, but just pray for this kid." And so they're like, "Yeah, man, a lot of them already were praying for him." And so the next morning, when he woke up, his eyes were clear. There was no more bleeding. There was no more episodes of self-harm. He was back to being normal Jack. And he did get discharged. He had to serve, I think it was a few years in prison, in military prison because of the drug charge. Then he got out and joined a church on the East Coast and sent us all Christmas cards saying how well he's doing. He's back in the faith, and it was just wonderful to see that resolution there. That there was something. There's a detail I forgot to mention, and this is what it was really interesting. Is when I was speaking to him and he was scared that right before he went to bed that night, I asked him, "Well, you're hurting yourself. Well, why are you doing that?" He says, "It's not me, man." He says, "I'm sitting there looking through a window, and something else is in charge." He says, when that happens, something else is there, and it's like he can see it happening, but he's not in control of it. He's like seeing things through a window, is how he described it. And yeah, so that was my first encounter with anyone that qualified as demonic. And understand, we dealt with so many different kind of psychiatric illnesses, from acute to chronic illnesses. This was unlike any of those, and he wasn't diagnosed with anything but a kind of a personality disorder, which isn't it's not something you take medication for. It's not like you're hearing voices or seeing things, anything like that. And so this doesn't fit any of the criteria in the DSM, which was what they would use for diagnostics. And yeah, it was. I would say maybe 2 or 3 people that in my 10,000 patient hours I had in that unit, I would suspect was probably demonic in nature. But that was the first one, and I think what's reassuring, what I've heard from other people when I tell them this, it's like, "Oh, so you didn't know anything." I'm like, "Yeah, man, I just knew Jesus. I just knew how to be obedient, and that's it. That's it. You don't need to go to seminary. You don't need to know what to do or to be used by God in those situations. And that you need to know this. So if you find yourself in this situation, much like I found myself, this was uninvited, and that you need to know what to do. The break glass in case of emergency. And I think that's what the whole supernatural world is about, especially with the church. Is we need to have those break glass in case of emergency for every believer out there.
Absolutely.
So, man, I love this story for so many reasons, because first of all, you're, like you just said, you're a young Christian. You don't know anything. You just know enough to be obedient. You don't really have like theological baggage that's going to keep you from doing one thing or thinking another thing or whatever. But at the same time, the reason, Malachi, I love this is because you're one of the very few Reformed Baptist people that I know that I can talk to about this kind of stuff, and that has thought through it himself, and you've had a lot of time to reflect on this, right? So, as I hear the story of this guy, and I think you would agree, but I just want to get your answer. Here he is, like, bleeding from all these orifices. He's telling you things like, I'm not the one in charge of this. And then you hear this, he stands up as you're praying silently in your head, and he says, stop praying for me, really loud. And then he goes right back to sleep. As you think about this now, are you convinced that this was demonic?
Oh yeah. There's no way he could have known I was praying. And again, embarrassingly, I was hiding my Christianity. In psych, the culture there is very atheistic, is very materialistic. I wanted to be seen as respectable to my peers, and I wasn't as vocal. But I tell you one thing: after this, I was. They couldn't shut me up after this, But at the time, yeah, I mean, I was just another soldier in a uniform, and I'm trying to I was just still trying to feel out my own faith, let alone someone else's, and so when I say I felt completely inadequate, I mean that's an understatement. I was inadequate, but Christ wasn't. Thankfully,
God isn't. Yeah,
all right,
that's right.
So
That's
my
right.
second question is, I mean, this is wild because I've never heard anything like this at all. You're just simply praying for this guy. Like you're not praying for God to cast the demon out of him.
No,
Or anything,
oh
right?
no,
Exactly.
Mm-mm.
So
I didn't want to make that connection in my head because
right, yeah, right.
Yeah.
Okay, so here you are praying for a guy in the middle of the night in your head. The demon understands that you're praying for him, and somehow through this event of not even going through an exorcism, we brought Malachi Martin earlier just as kind of a joke. So Father Malachi Martin is a guy that we both heard about from Coast to Coast years ago, who would go on Art Bell's show.
In fact, I would listen to him during night shift when I was working there. Yeah.
Oh, really?
I love it. I love it.
After the fact, right?
He did one episode that became like super, super popular where he's talking about the exorcisms that he had performed, and he wrote a book or two about that.
Right.
And in that book, he starts talking, in the interview, he starts talking about, to an evangelical guy who had called in and had talked about how he was talking, from what I recall, about how the Catholic Church has to go through step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to do all these exorcisms. The guy's just kind of like, just cast it out in the name of Jesus. And then Martin gets all upset because he goes, you don't know what you're messing with, man. You don't have the power of the church behind you. And
Right.
it was this kind of, it was really a battle between Rome and evangelical Christianity. Yeah. And so
Totally.
Your story is so interesting because here you are just praying for a guy who has a demon, and the demon knows about it, and it gets up and confronts you. All of a sudden, it's like it's gone.
Yeah.
And you weren't even praying for an exorcism. Like,
no.
But it's very telling. It's very telling about the warfare that's happening in the spiritual realm.
Right.
Because just the fact that you're sitting there just praying for the guy, and all these demons are seeing what's happening right next, they're getting annoyed you know?
Yeah.
And they're saying, hey, cut it out. You know, we've got this. We're in control of this, and you're sticking your hands into this. So it's very telling about what's happening in that realm that we don't see with our eyes.
That's right. Right, and that was my first real, well, not my first in my life, but it was my first, as a Christian, where the kind of veil was taken that away, and it was an eye opener. It definitely strengthened my faith. It was something that uh, it was a sentinel event. It was something that really, I was like, well, I need to learn more. I don't want to feel as inadequate. I want to know more about this, and that really kind of got me on that path to really study scriptures deeper, study the whole spiritual world, deeper. Make more sense of all these things, so that when somebody has a question about that I could, provide an answer for them from a biblical worldview.
And that answer's so great. I've been talking with several people last week about how in these fringy circles that I've found myself in, that there's so many people that are interested in the fringy part of it and the supernatural part of it and the weirdness of it, but they're being tossed to and fro by every wind of doctrine, and they're falling prey to so many different things, and it's like there's no grounding and no base. And I don't know if it's because people don't know where to go, or if because they're really not that interested in the grounding. But here I have a guy on this show, one of my good friends, who's talking about how that weird, crazy event actually turned him to go and search deeper in the scripture so that he can find answers to these questions. And man, that's something that I would just encourage. I can't encourage that enough for people, how serious it is to do that. You have thoughts about that, Malachi?
Oh no, that's 100% correct. There seems to be an adopted materialism within the church that we've somehow borrowed, and it views these subjects as icky and weird, and but that's not an attitude we find.
Taboo.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's not the attitude we find in the scriptures toward it, um, and we can't deny it's there, and it is a ministry. It is a part of the church to deal with these things, and if we were doing it more properly, it would be an evangelistic tool itself. And I think that's the whole point of
Absolutely.
this, is for evangelism. It's not just to alleviate spiritual oppression; it's there to win souls. And if people see, I don't know how to describe it. I guess an analogy is if Darth Vader were to show up on the White House lawn, then somebody would make the connection. Well, I guess Luke and Yoda must be real. You know, uh, it's the truth. That there's a lot of it there. Um, I don't think it's I don't think it's God hiding these things from people. I think that's the enemy. He thrives in darkness. He thrives, in behind that veil, and I think it is the job of the church to take that veil away and address it where we see it.
What are your thoughts on um I'm not quite sure how to put the question, but what are your thoughts on the idea of these kind of formal exorcism ministries that you hear about, whether it's in Rome or Pentecostals are doing it or whatever, versus what happened to you? I mean, it
Uh,
seems like an extraordinary thing that a
I
demon would
think
leave just by praying for a guy in your head and not even praying for an exorcism.
right, but I also have to take into account, if Jesus is correct, what he's saying here is there are degrees of strength of these things. I might have just got the easy one, you know. Oh no, I'm not trying to diss Martin or any of these guys, but I might have just got really lucky,
Yeah, yeah.
with this one. I might, So I don't know. I really can't speak to them. What I do know is a common denominator. There is a common denominator within all those things, and that is they truly believe Christ's power is enough to get this job done, whether it's Roman Catholic, Reformed Baptist, or charismatic. It doesn't, that they really believe the blood of Christ and his authority, um, can accomplish the thing that they are setting themselves out to do. I did read Martin's book, Hostage to the Devil. I consider it one of, if not the definitive work on this, at least his ability to record
Yeah,
these events is just tremendous.
it's a
Um,
fantastic book.
I
I've read
love
it
what
2 or
he
3
said.
times.
Yeah, I love what he said about the Roman ritual. And he said, this is not some magic thing that they do. It's for the officiator to keep their mind on track. It's to keep them from being distracted. That it's still Christ that they are appealing to through this process. That the only reason they have it is kind of, we would kind of consider formulaic, is because of the sort of thing that might happen when you're dealing with this. That they have a flow chart, because it's super easy to get confused and be attacked, you know. So I totally appreciate what they're doing there and why they're doing it.
Well, in the Bible, we have, we have a very clear example of two people who tried to go meddling,
Right.
and they did it wrong.
Right.
And it cost them dearly.
Right.
So, you have to think that at very least they understand what's really at stake.
Right.
As you said before, I was raised, Pentecostal charismatic, so I've seen a lot on both sides. I've seen the overhypeness and the abuse and all that stuff, and I've seen some. We could trade stories. We definitely could trade stories. But yeah, there is definitely it's not something, like you said, it is a ministry. It is a definitely a calling. There's an impartation of the Holy Spirit, I believe, that falls on folks like yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's I think it's more ubiquitous. I believe that every believer, that, like I said, that they need to be aware of this, because every believer can act in this capacity.
Absolutely.
If the Holy Spirit brings them in that situation, and I also believe that he'll prep us for that. That's what I've seen in my own life.
Definitely.
And others. But to raise an active resistance against the whole that whole world is shooting yourself in the foot, and it's not what we're here to do.
Yeah.
Why don't you move to the? Yeah, no, go ahead.
Yeah,
go to the second one.
Man.
Go to the second one.
So, in contrast with the first one was just me and this dude. So the second one, there was more folks involved. So, okay. So where I start? Okay. So about 7 days after we are married, me and my.
So how many years is this after this initial
is
story?
This would be in 2004. The first one occurred in 2001. So about 3 years later. So we are at her grandparents' home. They had a daughter in Washington State that had just lost her battle with cancer. So her aunt had died up in Washington State. Her grandparents were up there, dealing with everything that you have to process to get the body back to Mississippi so they can have their funeral. So what we were doing is we were going by, staying in her grandparents' home with another relative. I got to be discreet with this. With another female relative who had, her daughter was there, and this relative, we'll call her Debbie. And so Debbie was in her late 30s about, and she had a, she's divorced a couple times, and she was trying to reunite with her one of her ex-husbands. And as we're sitting there, one of the elders of the same church that prayed for Crystal whenever she was in the hospital. So this elder named Brother Dick is what his name is, Richard. He and his wife came by to drop off a casserole, for their grandparents. And Debbie knows him and wanted him to pray for her to try to reestablish this marriage with a relationship with her ex-husband. So they when they leave, Debbie, the elder brother Dick, and his wife leave, and they are gonna go pray in the driveway or the carport, and we were just inside there with Debbie's daughter, just kind of babysitting a little bit, and um, about an hour passes, and we just realized, like, wait a sec, where's Debbie? Like, it's been a while since they walked outside, and around that moment we hear someone screaming outside. We're like, oh no, what's going on? And so the way that the home is situated, there's by the carport, there's like a bathroom, and um, me and Crystal we're curious, so we're gonna go eavesdrop what's going on back there, and we listen. It was we heard muffled yelling on Debbie's part, and just kind of very calm, collected communication on part of Brother Dick, and uh, then the daughter hears it. It's like, oh, my mom's just being dramatic or something, and so she storms off. Then I said, hey, Crystal, will you go and keep her back there? I'm gonna go ahead and go outside and see what's going on to try and solve whatever conflict this is, because this is so inappropriate. This is like right on the heels of their relative dying of cancer. So this is what an odd event, in with such a somber time. And so I walk outside, and what I'm seeing is the first person I see is Brother Dick's wife. I can't remember her name. And she's leaning up against her car. She's just praying intently with her Bible in her hand. And I walk up to her. I was like, hey, what's going on? And she looks at me. I've never met this woman from Adam. I don't know her from Adam. And she says, are you a Christian? I was like, yeah. And at first I'm like, wow, do you start all your conversations out this way? And so as she said it, I'm listening to what is coming out of the mouth of Debbie. Now Debbie is a lower educated, Southern, she's not gonna, she's not very articulate or anything like that. She's a good old gal, right? Really kind and nice, very, very, a super awesome person. And for her to be yelling at this man, it's like, what did he say? Especially the church elder, what did he say? So I'm listening, and I noticed that Debbie's speaking in the third person. That was the first weird thing. Like, what is going on here? And then some of the things that she's saying, and then it's just the growling and all that. I'm like, oh, okay, I know what this is. Right? Yeah. It's like, okay. He goes, all right, I'm gonna go help him. I'm telling this to Brother Dick's wife. You keep praying. I'm gonna go help him, because it looks like she's about to tear this man in half, right? Oh, he's super short, by the way. He's maybe 5'2", if that, 5'1". So Debbie, she kind of towers over him. She's about 5'7", and I don't interrupt, right? I'm like, okay, this is because he's what it sounds like, he's doing a good job. He's addressing her. He's praying, and so I get behind her because I'm afraid that it's going to get violent. So I get behind her, and I just put her kind of in a full Nelson while she's walking around, and her eyes are just fixed on him, and she's saying things like one of them was, "Who are you, little Christian man? She belongs to us." That's the second time I heard that, right? And this is what got me. She says, she said, "We've been here for 10,000 years. You are but a vapor to us." Wow. And at this point, it's like, yeah, this is not Debbie, right? This is not this is not her, right? Just her personality alone, let alone some of the language she's using, right? So I'm praying, he's praying, but she's like really strong. She like just, I'm a grown man. I'm ex-military, right? But I felt like if she wanted to, she could have flung me like 20 feet, man. You could just feel the strength in her.
Yeah.
And it was really off-putting. And so Crystal, if you remember, for the past past 2 weeks about 2-3 weeks, she had been asking all these demon questions, right? Like, wow, I never want to be in that situation, right? Oh my goodness. And so here it is in her grandparents' house. It's happening right now. She comes outside to look, and at this point, me and brother Dick, Debbie would be going in and out of herself, right? And we were telling her, she'd have these moments of lucidity. We would tell her, you got to call out. You have to help us here. You've got to call out on Jesus. And so she's like, okay, I'll do it. And she says, in the name of, and she couldn't say it. Her mouth would just start contorting, and she couldn't get the word Jesus out of her mouth. Yeah. And she's like, and she's just scared to death, And then her eyes would start dilating, and she'd start growling again and foaming at the mouth, the whole 9 yards. And so we have her down where she's sitting, and she's sitting on the ground. I'm still behind her. Brother Dick's in front of her. And Crystal, she said, this is her relaying this to me. She said she felt pulled to come out there because that's her relative. She loves this person. She's like, I just want to sit idly by. And so she opens the door. She looks out, and this thing is staring right at her, like just right at her. It's like her focus was on Brother Dick, but now this is the first time she shifted her gaze over to her. This is the same house that she attempted in, right? So, she is like, okay, nope, right? This thing's staring right at me. Starts smiling at her, and she says, nope. She turns around and she goes to walk back inside. She said it was like this wall. There was like a wall there, and she's like, oh no, I've got to do this, And then she said she just got angry. She said she got super angry that this thing is bullying this person she loves. And then I was so proud of her. She just comes out swinging, She comes out there and just gets in its face and said, how dare you? You let her go and all this stuff, And so here we have 3 people doing it. Well, 4 with Brother Dick's wife. And we're doing this for a long time, an hour. We're exhausted. We're getting nowhere, right? And out of the blue, this car pulls into this driveway. And they're in a remote location. This car pulls into this driveway, and this woman looks like a soccer mom. She hops out of this car and runs up there and starts praying for Debbie, right? And we're like, who are you? And apparently she is a friend of Debbie's who was sitting there cooking dinner, and the Lord told her to get up, get in her car, and go over there now. And so she just pulls in, screeches and everything, like she saw the bat signal or something. And so she's up there, she's praying, and this thing starts talking to her. And this thing said to her, your prayers are useless, and your fasting is useless, And then she's like, well, how did you know I was fasting? So she had been praying and fasting for Debbie for a week, because she just felt that burden for a whole week. So she's like, well, if it wasn't working, you wouldn't be saying that right now,
Right.
And so once she showed up, it was about 5-10 minutes. It was over. She started being able to call out on the name of the Lord. And once that happened, it was super quick. And so afterwards, I think the whole ordeal lasted about at least an hour and a half. I mean, it was long. And afterwards, I sat there down and spoke with her and was like, hey, do you kind of know what happened? you know, and I just kind of walked her through, you know, when these, you know, there's a lot of things in your life that you may have opened yourself up to these, but now you know the power of Christ. You know it's real. You know what you got to do, and so she, you know, she goes back into church. In fact, we wanted to set up like a second kind of session with her, just a prayer session, just with the elders of that church. So that's that Sunday she comes into church, and or I'm sorry, it was a Wednesday. That Wednesday she comes into church, and they're in this conference room, and this conference room has this huge oak table. It's probably like 60 years old, weighs about a ton, who knows, huge, and they're all in this conference room, just the elders, with Debbie, and then she starts to manifest again, and this time it's something totally different, some other thing talking, and her tongue turned black and really bizarre stuff. She took that table, that big conference table, and threw it like 2 feet across the room. And this is all relayed to us from Brother Dick afterwards. And they had this whole nother thing with her. And he was, it was like, it's like the first one was the cork, you know, and all the rest came out afterwards. And so, yeah, and she was having dreams of like and seeing like a black figure in a top hat, which is actually very common, believe it or not. With this is there's a lot of people see this is these hatted figures, black figures, and these shadow creatures and all this stuff. So she experienced all those. So that was the second one, and what's cool is it confirmed everything that Crystal was afraid of. That, oh wait, that means it's me, right? I don't want to do this. But I was so proud of her. Oh my goodness. But again, look at the contrast between that and the first one. This is clearly two different. This is a case by case basis. So it's on that I say, look, I know, like, the Catholics have this thing. I know the Pentecostals have their thing. But I believe if it's successful, it's only because they believe that Christ is able to do this. And they try to get as many people involved as possible. I think that is another critical thing, that you need as many believers. It works. I mean, it really works. The more people you got, the stronger it is.
Absolutely.
So you said that there was this like prophecy, right? That you and your wife would have this ministry or whatever with regard to this whole topic of demons. So, I mean, do you have any more stories, or how do you see that having played itself out after your first week of marriage?
So look, I don't know anything about a ministry of demons. All I know is this guy said, you and your wife, there will be many souls saved. You will go and you will cast out demons. So it could be, maybe that's the only two. I don't know.
Yeah,
Look,
yeah,
that's not something
yeah.
that, definitely not something I am on the hunt for. I know that there's like these demon hunter guys and all that. I am all about, look, the Lord wants me to be involved in that, then he's going to have to orchestrate it, because I'm not out there looking for it, right? But I think as the days continue, I think it's going to be a luxury to not have encountered something like that. I think that this activity is on the rise. I think it's far more ubiquitous than we know. But I think where you'll see it probably most often is in an evangelical role. So if you plan on preaching the gospel, if you plan on wanting to be part of Christ's salvation of souls, then you will encounter this.
So are you saying that because the gospel is present in that world, or why do you single out the evangelicals like that?
I mean, evangelical meaning, yeah, not the group. I mean the occupation. If you believe that you should be spreading the gospel, in doing so, in fulfilling the Great Commission, you will encounter this, I guess is a better way to say it.
Yeah,
whether it be any church affiliate, right?
So Malachi, so do you feel that much in the way that the Lord gives us all giftings for a specific area in our lives? Would you agree that there are people, believers, that have a special? I know the word carries a little bit of
I know what you mean.
Yep.
an anointing, if you
Right.
will, over them for that, which may be why the demons manifest or are more prone to manifest themselves around certain people.
I mean, that's a possibility. My mom has some pretty wild stories where she would, there was we were going to this church in Maryland when I was a kid, and it turned out that had some really odd beliefs. She had shown up to the pastor's door one day, just to ask about something, and when she opened the door, he started hissing and slithering on the ground like a snake, and she's like really freaked out, and like she didn't welcome that, but I really believe that has to do with with just being in Christ. Honestly, I think it's something that when Jesus sent out the disciples and the 40, that um, he's saying, expect this, that this is something that is going to be attached to the spreading of the gospel, not necessarily, this one person having a special anointing. I think we're all anointed to share our faith. That if we do that,
Absolutely.
yeah, and if we do that, you have to be prepared for the things that those men experienced.
So not necessarily, and I say this with all kindness in my heart, not necessarily a huge bunch of support for that in the Baptist Church. I would
Oh
think.
no.
Tell me a little bit about that. Like,
All right.
you
So
know,
I'm a Southern Baptist, so I'm,
yeah.
and our church, we're a Back Bay church. We're here on the Mississippi Gulf Coast, and we are SBC affiliate. There, I mean, honestly, I think it depends on the generation. The SBC, I mean, it's massive. It's got a whole spectrum of folks in there. I think there's a pretty good swath of people that are less kind of traditional, Southern Baptist, and they are a lot more open to this. And honestly, a lot of the work with Heiser and Doug and all these guys, I mean, there is a reformation that I see happening. When I can, because I'm in a lot of different theology groups now, and when I can sit across the table with like some people who are polar theological opposites,
Mm-hmm.
and just get giddy whenever we start talking about Heiser and all these guys, and we have these things to bond over. That's when I was like, hey, there's something going on here.
Mm-hmm.
That's been very eye-opening.
Yeah.
Very eye-opening. Yeah, absolutely.
And I love to see it. I love to see that. I love to see this bond of believers that is higher than our theological differences, and I think that's what's going to be transformative if we maintain that.
Amen.
Yeah, I've
Absolutely.
looked at the denominations. I've tried to look at them in a positive way that a lot of people don't do. People just think they're just divisive or whatever. I look at them more like rooms in a castle or something like
There you
that.
go.
Everybody has to go sleep in a room. So you have to pick some room, right? So
Right.
you're not all going to lay out in the great hall every night sleeping So in their best, they're ways that people of like mind can get together and live in harmony and peace on kind of doctrines that are really essential to them. But the castle is the whole church. It's not just a one
Absolutely.
room.
That's right.
And too often the room becomes what people think is the whole castle, and that's not the case. So it has been very interesting to me too to see this cross denominational spectrum of people that are kind of uniting over this supernatural worldview. It's like it's transcending denominational boundaries without, and I hope this is in a good way, at least the people that are in denominations, without destroying those, the good things that can come
Right.
out of the different denominations.
Absolutely.
They don't have to sacrifice their theological distinctives in order
Right.
to unify on this. Right.
Right.
Well, and understand that the basis of my question is not necessarily to highlight our differences. It's more of a curiosity of how leadership has reacted to your experiences, or have you faced opposition, or
No, I mean I'm in a wonderful church with we have an eldership, so there's four of us,
Mhm.
and these guys are like my brothers, man.
That's
They
awesome.
love it, man. They're like,
What's
That's
the name
yeah,
of
awesome.
your church?
it's Back Bay Church. Back Bay Church. We're in St. Martin, which is right north of Ocean Springs. Something I found interesting. This is so, with these events in my life, again, it prompted me to go to look into these things deeper, to listen to other experiences that people have had, just across the whole board. And when you know you when you look at this and you see, wow, there it's only in Christianity that can really supply an answer for everything, like
Yeah.
literally there hasn't been a event or supernatural thing that I've heard from any secular or non-secular sources that isn't explained in scripture. And I think that's another thing that really needs to be demonstrated and shown. It's like this is all biblical stuff. We should never have. No one should come to a Christian that has had an issue or experience that's supernatural nature, and they are met with skepticism.
Mm-hmm.
They are
Mm-hmm.
met with a hand in the face or ridicule. That is not what we're here to
Yeah.
do. We're here to provide those answers for them and to help them
Absolutely.
through it, and to show them the supremacy of Christ to what it is they experience.
I love your philosophy on the fact that as believers, I mean, it's biblical, that we would be empowered by the power of the Holy Spirit. And I realize, again, having a charismatic background, but also being a feet on the ground charismatic. I'm almost a reluctant charismatic, to be perfectly honest with you. Not just because of of the obvious that we're talking about, but because I've also worked. My career has been in broadcast Christian television for 30 years. And I've met some of the most amazing people in it. I've also met some disappointing people,
Right.
So I've learned to have a healthy amount of skepticism about certain things, not about the power of the Holy Spirit, not about the power of the Lord, but a lot of times to the motives and the showboating and the grandstanding. So all that simply to say, my approach is with feet on the ground. But I love what you're saying, and I hear you totally. That yeah, as believers, we were told it's biblical. We have the power to raise the dead. He
Right.
said, why are you guys so impressed about this? You'll be able to do this and more.
Mhm.
And it seems that scares people. And again, like I said, I know why. Because a lot of abuse has happened
Sure.
surrounding those things. But it doesn't change the fact that that we are endowed with the authority of God's power. You
Right.
know. So yeah, that resounds with me a lot.
Right. Absolutely. Doug, I have a question for you.
Go
You
for
ready?
it.
So, okay. So one of the things that really piqued my interest. This is after the fact. This is after I started reading, a lot on this and kind of the origins of demons and, the spirits of the Nephilim. Uh, when this thing was talking through Debbie, it said, "We've been here for 10,000 years, and
Oh,
and you're but a vapor." It reminded me of. It now reminds me of uh, in First Enoch, where there is a judgment placed upon the Nephilim, the spirits of the Nephilim, that for 10,000 years they would roam and tempt man. Uh, and I believe that this is historically accurate, and uh, that it's interesting that when the demons encountered Jesus, the demoniac, the gathering demoniac, that they said to him, "Why have you come before the appointed time?" I think they were probably talking about that. That there's an appointed time for their own, um, judgment, for their that this time of their freedom is going to be come to an end, and that when Christ came, it was before that appointed time. But this thing said we've been here for 10,000 years. I just think it's interesting for those who believe eschatologically we're on the closing end of that versus the beginning of it. What are your thoughts about that? And let me preface this. I know we shouldn't be informing our theology by anything that comes out of a demon's mouth. So I'm not saying that. I just found,
but it is interesting. It is definitely
interesting that
Yeah.
it said 10,000 years, and we see in First Enoch that that's exactly how long the reign they kind of have lasts. So, do you think that they know that the time is coming, that the time is short?
Oh man, there's so much in that. You know, when
I
you
know.
said that, the first thing that popped into my head was the mound builders of
Yeah.
America and the Mississippi mounds, because you live down there, you know,
Right.
and just how old are those things?
Right.
Because are they 500 years old? Are they 4,000 years old? Are they how far back do those cultures go?
Sure.
And so I don't know about the answer to that. I do know I'm outnumbered in my eschatology in this little room here, because we have two premillennialists and then one guy who's not. So
Look, man, I love your position.
How do I preface that?
I have a huge respect for your position, man.
It's a tough one, you know. In Luke, when you brought up the 10,000 years, my mind went to Jubilees, and it might be in Enoch too, where it talks about these 70 generations thing.
Yeah.
And I wonder if there isn't an overlap in conceptually there with the idea of 10,000 or 1,000 and 70 generations, and they're all kind of symbolic for a really long period of time.
Right.
And preaching through Luke, and I think this could actually be a pretty interesting series for folks, Rudy, to kind of think about the coming of Christ with regard to what we're talking about here, his first coming. It doesn't necessarily mean that I'm going to give like a dogmatic answer about the second, but in the first coming, it's interesting because Jesus comes after 77 generations in Luke's gospel, in Luke 3. And you have the 7 generations from Adam to Enoch, and then you have 70 more generations that come after that. And so right there you have this tip of the hat to what Enoch and Jubilees are talking about with regard to the demons of their appointed time. But you bring up something, Malachi, it's so interesting, which is that they're like, well, why have you come before the appointed time, right? And so part of me with your question defaults to kind of an already not yet thing, which we actually would hold in common, that somehow Jesus's first coming actually did something legally to these creatures, but they're prowling around, if you want to call it that, something like that. They're messing around on the earth. The way Jubilees talks about it is that I think it's Prince Mastema, hostility, hatred. That's what his name means. Is another name for Satan. Is arguing with one of the pre-Diluvian patriarchs about what to do with these creatures, and he says, well, you can't destroy them all. You have to let 1/10 of them continue to roam around. It's a really bizarre story. Right. And that becomes the explanation for why we have these demons here still today. But if there's some sort of a legal thing that Jesus did at his coming, which I think is also related to his ministry, his baptism, his anointing, his casting out of the demons, to the transfiguration and the whole events that take place there, and then obviously to his death and his resurrection and his ascension. I think that this is the reason why the name of Jesus holds that kind of power that it didn't hold before, because his coming as a human, as one of us, and then doing the things that he did is what legally destroys their authority over people today. And um, so that, I mean, I'm kind of ignoring your question just because I don't know really how to answer in terms of, is the time short? I mean, I have my beliefs, and my inkling, the hairs on the back of my neck say the time is short, and that they know that too. But
Right.
at the same time, it's hard for me to be dogmatic about it because I've lived
Sure.
through so many of those.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Jesus is coming
Yeah.
back this year, sorts
That's
of
right.
things. So,
Yeah. I'll make no predictions, man.
yeah, exactly.
Well, and I'm not, and I promise, like, I'm not opening this can of worms, but or stirring, I should say, this can of worms. But the thing is, as it pertains to that specific thing about, like what was it, 88 reasons why the Lord would
Right.
return in 88.
Right.
I think that sometimes, like, the baby gets thrown out with the bathwater with that, because it's downright unbiblical to try to put a date on it. I mean, straight up, that's just theologically wrong.
Right.
I don't necessarily feel that way about the seasons.
Well,
and
Rudy, he
around
said the same thing in that book, though. He goes, it says you can't know the day or the hour, but it doesn't mean you can't know the weekend. So he was
No,
playing around
that's
with
wrong.
the language,
That's wrong.
That's
To me, that's, you're still doing that.
Yeah, yeah.
In the grand scheme of the master timeline, that's like semantics.
No, completely.
So that, again, I'm totally with you on that. To me, that's just downright.
And I think it's providential that we don't know that, because I think we all know what people are like, and if you set a date, we're like, oh, okay,
I'll party till 2 hours before.
That's exactly right. Rather, he said, be prepared. Expect it anytime. And
he does even talk about knowing, you guys are able to go outside and look at the weather and see what's going to happen, tomorrow, the next day. Why can't you do that with the
budding of the fig tree?
Right.
And so, and I do think that there's some of that has already happened with the 70 AD event. I mean, he predicts that in the first part of the Olivet Discourse, and very clearly. I mean, you won't see one stone left on another. The Romans are going to come and do this and that. And he has some of that language there. And in fact, the Christians left Jerusalem when they saw Rome surrounding the city, and Titus was outside. They're like, we're out of here. And that saved their lives. And 1 million Jews didn't leave the city, and they died because Jesus had given them a warning. Well, I do think that there is some sort of a tie in to be able for them to know the seasons then, but also for us to know the seasons today. So I agree with you. I don't think we should throw the baby out with the bathwater on that. But
I'll tell you one thing that I found very interesting about what you said, Malachi, was when you said that, quoted the demons, that 10,000, we've been here 10,000 years. The first thing that popped into my mind, and I'm not necessarily saying, "Ooh, this is a thing," but again, in looking at the broad timeline of, especially as it pertains to the work of Heiser and all the things that the giants and the Nephilim and the Watchers and all that. There seems to be, and I've gone back and checked, and I stand by this, that it would seem. The first thing that came into my mind was our interview that we did for the film that Doug and I just finished in the last couple of years. When we went to Rock Art Ranch out in Arizona, it's an amazing place. A lot of petroglyphs, a lot of depictions of things that look like aliens and whatnot. It was actually studied very, very carefully, and they pinned the age of it at about 9 to 10,000 years. And it seems that everywhere that we go, that seems to be about the ceiling, is about that time. So I feel like there's something to that. I feel like there's something to that number, to the origins of when these beings went from being Nephilim to being demons.
Right.
So that really kind of struck a chord with
right. Me. And at the time, I didn't know any of this. I mean, so it's only in retrospect that picking these things out, it's like, wait, that actually has some significance there,
Exactly. So, no, it's It's really mind blowing. Very, very. You've experienced something that a lot of believers probably, thankfully, have not. You know,
Right.
it's funny when you said that you didn't need any coffee the rest of the night. You
No.
know, I've witnessed that as well, and I probably didn't need coffee for about a week, to be
Yeah.
honest with you.
There you go.
It's real. A lot of people don't realize. And what's interesting to me is how sometimes, and I don't want to say art imitates life, you know, but it just seems to me that a lot of times, and I've seen it more pronounced probably over the last five, maybe I've just been paying more attention, but 5 to 10 years, how a lot of the things that are coming out of Hollywood, a lot of the movies and whatnot, when they start dealing with the spiritual aspect of things, they're pretty darn close to reality.
Yeah.
You know, which makes you wonder: is it that somebody is, because they would never in a million years admit to doing research, especially from the evangelical. I mean, they would all day long from Catholics, and they have. I mean, The Exorcist, you know.
Sure.
But from the evangelical side, you know, from the Protestant side, if you will, I don't think they would caught dead doing that out of Hollywood, or admit to it anyways. And yet a lot of times when I see these movies that have to do with demons and whatnot, I see more influence, more and more influence in the writing from the things that actually are the things that you're describing. You know, have you any idea, any thoughts on that?
I mean, I think we could all agree that there is a mastermind in Hollywood, and that whether they know it or not, and so it makes sense that there's this cohesion that we could see that maybe the general audience couldn't. That's like, yeah, I know what that is, you know.
But you know what I'm saying, though, right?
Well, yeah, it's strangely accurate.
Yeah.
Some of the things that they do. This is not, you know. But I do believe that there's a void left with the kind of the new atheistic movement of the late 90s, early 2000s, that it leaves a void that people are wanting to fill. You know, it just doesn't satisfy the human experience. We're spiritual creatures, we're worshipful creatures. And I think that you know, Hollywood is a priest almost to that world, and they do a very good job at for what they're employed to do by the enemy. So yeah, it's interesting, but not surprising that it's getting more and more accurate.
They're both a prophet and a priest, because they're getting a lot of their knowledge from firsthand experience. Put it that way.
Absolutely.
And so they're dabbling in this stuff much more than dabbling in a lot of cases.
Oh, yeah.
They're in full league with them, and then they take that over to the movie itself.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the truth part, in terms of what's happening, what you're seeing, that we could see just theologically or whatever, they're getting it from experience.
Primary sources, right?
Right. Primary sources. Exactly. Why do you think it is, Malachi? We met in kind of a Reformed chat room, I think, and the kind of the conservative, evangelical, Reformed world that really likes their theology, really likes to talk about doctrines of God, and even doctrines of the Trinity, doctrines of Christ, resurrection, all these kinds of things. We have this supernatural stuff in our theology that we like to talk about abstractly. But I've noticed that it's very difficult to get many of the guys in these circles to talk about this kind of stuff. And I know you've thought about this. Why do you think that is?
It's that, so just speaking about Reformed circles, there's this scholasticism that they pride themselves on. And as we know, the scholastic world is very materialistic. And so I think it just comes back down to, wanting to be seen as an intellectually legitimate. And the Reformed world has done a good job, priding themselves on that. And they don't do a good job, generally speaking, of the looking at our relationship with God on a very personal level. They're very good at it on a doctrinal level, all these things. But there's almost like your greatest strength is your greatest weakness as well. It's more difficult to get someone who's really structured their Christianity, their Christian identity in their mind to be a set of theological presuppositions and well executed arguments for this, that, and whatnot. It's difficult to get somebody who's in that mind frame to start thinking of the kind of the nebulous part of Christianity, the one where we are children of God and He has something for us to do right here and now, and He's going to direct you to do it, and you better listen. That's you can't nail that to a wall, but that's a very real part of the Christian faith, of the Christian walk. I always think of Paul in Acts. He's out there preaching the gospel, right? Fulfilling the Great Commission. And then suddenly the Holy Spirit says, do not preach the gospel in Asia, but go through there. Don't say anything. That directly conflicts with what he knows Christ commanded. Yet he recognized the person who said this to him as God. So he obeyed that, that's kind of that for the reformed mind, that is a whoa, you can't do that. Like that doesn't fit the hole there, but that there is a day-to-day reality to our walk, that every day, like in Psalm 139:6, that you knew me before, and all my days are written before any one of them took place, that He has something for us to do, and He guides us and shapes us and prepares us and leads us to that. And you're not going to find out what that is in theology books. Theology is good to have. It gives us great boundaries, and it's like a defense of error. But it is not designed to be the end all be all of, it's designed to be part of our Christian faith, not the end of our Christian faith. And I think
it's like the grounding of it, but not the purpose for why we were created. You're bringing something up that I don't know that I've thought about like this quite before. That our you're gonna have to edit this a little bit, Rudy, because I'm having a mental block. But so talk about what you were just talking about again.
Our kind of our faith in action, that it's something that the Lord deals with us on a day-to-day basis.
So Christians are in this world are of the Reformed theological world. We want to I don't know. It's like we want to say that we have a relationship with God, but we don't want it to be a relationship with God. It's a really strange kind of a thing.
Exactly. Right.
I mean, you're describing a relationship. You're describing warm evangelical, born again Christianity sort of stuff. That for whatever reason, some people just kind of get really nervous about that, which is strange because it's supposed to be a father-child relationship that you have. Exactly. It's a living walk with the living God, and it's not just all in the head.
When I was I think I was about 6 or 7 years old, my dad was building a back deck on the house, and he's great. He's really good at woodworking and all that, and he brought me out there, and he's like, "Hey, son, go get the Phillips, or go get this thing." And I would go and get it from the tool shed and give it to him. I probably added hours to his project. If he would have just done it himself, it would have been so much quicker instead of me fumbling around for things, right? Christianity is that. Why did my dad ask me to come? Why did he bring me? because he wanted me to be part of what he was doing. That's what he wanted. It wasn't because I am contributing in any shape, way, or form, but it's because he wants to bring me along with what he's doing. We are the children of God. He's building the deck. He wants us involved with that. He wants our names on that as well. And we got to think of our faith and our walk in this life as that. We're part of this. That he, we can't just look at the instructions like of the deck. That's what would be our doctrine. You need to have it, right? But that isn't the point. The point is to come alongside and be used by the Lord to do those things that he's working in this world to do. And I think that's what's sorely lacking in as at least as a focus in the Reformed faith.
Thinking about the weird world, the blurry world, the demonic world, the supernatural world, are people really that interested in just hearing about what you thought about the Washington, D.C. UFO hearings? Or are they more interested in hearing somebody that's actually had an experience talk about that experience and then try to think through it? Those are very different kinds of things. And I think if you can take that over into the other part of the supernatural world, which is our relationship with God, you can address it two different ways. You can have just my theologizing about who God is and what my relationship to be. And those are good things. I mean, it's good to have opinions on what we thought about the Washington, D.C. UFO hearings, but you actually have a story of your relationship with the Lord, how he saved you, what he's doing in your life today.
That's right.
And it's the story that's the power behind what is changing this world right now with the supernatural that we've been talking about with Heiser. And it's the story. People are swept up in it. And the more you can talk about experiential things and then connect that to something that's grounded, I think that's where you're going to reach the most kinds of people.
That's right. If you have one without the other, there's problems. When you have both together, I mean, it's amazing, right?
Yeah, too many people, we said earlier at the beginning of this, that too many people are only in it for the experiential part of it. And there is no grounding. But then too many other people, they can never get into the experiential part of it because that's taboo and you can't talk about that.
Right.
Very interesting.
And you're right. And Malachi, to your point, it does all tie back into God wanting you to be part of the experience. He wants us to have the experience.
That's right.
I keep going back to over the last 4 years or so of doing research on this and putting this documentary together. That one of the things that, because I am relatively new to the whole topic of the Watchers and the Nephilim and all this that Doug writes about. But my feeling, especially when we read about the powers and principalities of the air, the first thing that would come to my mind was, why would God even need those powers and principalities of the air? God doesn't need that. He doesn't need assistance? You know, why does he have watchers and looking over? Daniel is praying and the angel comes and he says, I met resistance from the Prince of Persia.
They wanted to snap his fingers, right?
Exactly.
But one of the folks on the documentary, one of the experts that we asked, he said because God wants them to, because he created these children to have a part of the experience. He wants them to have the experience, because in having the experiences is when we really truly find relationship. That we have something to put our faith and our trust in. Right.
That's right.
So
I also think, like with it's a great question, because I think a lot of people have that question. But if you look, I think God is a God of scale, and it's almost as if whenever you look in the Old Testament, there's these steps that you have to go through in order to approach him. Each one of those steps is like a procession of holiness that you go up.
Mm-hmm.
And without that scale, without that procession, I don't think we truly understand the buildup of how holy God is, that we have to go, just ontologically speaking, from the smallest creature up through the scale of creation. And God, by the time you get through that and you see God, you're like, you understand the scale of who he is compared to that. Kind of like when Jacob sent the procession of gifts to his brother Esau. You know, if he would have just says, hey, what's up, Esau? You know, here I am. He probably would die. He probably would have killed him. But there was this procession that with each thing, it made the last thing greater. And I think this procession of creatures, from the earthly creatures to the heavenly creatures, it shows the scale that when you get to God, it is special. It is unique. It is he. Yes, he is our Father. And Christ is our brother. But we have this scale of ontology that we go through, this ladder almost before we get to him. And the fact that Christ's death and atonement skips it, I don't think we appreciate how far of a distance that it bridges.
You're absolutely right. It underscores the size of the gap between him and us,
right?
Which further underscores the amount of love that it took for him to send us.
Right.
I agree totally.
The only way you can understand that infinite gap is with something finite. So why
something
not make
in between it? Right.
Yep, exactly.
That's amazing. I feel that to what we were talking about a little bit earlier, not too far back. It seems to me that one of the things that kind of hinders, I think, and it has seeped into the church in its own way, is that with so much technological advancement around us, it almost seems to paint the supernatural. And you made me think of this when you answered the question about how the experts, if you will, or the scholars in seminary kind of tend to shy away from this because it makes it cheapens their academic experience, their academic existence. It feels like technology kind of does the same. That the more high tech we are, the more advanced society gets, the more backwoods, for lack of a better word, it makes the entire spiritual experience to the degrees that you're experiencing it.
It's regressive.
How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. It's I think when we surround ourselves with the works of our own hands, we lose sight of the works of God's hands, and it's really difficult to see things properly whenever you're in that situation. Me and my wife were just talking about this the other day, as far as like urbanization. Going out on your balcony and see a bunch of concrete jungle versus going out on your balcony and seeing a jungle. There's something that happens to you, that day in and day out, when you're separated from the works of God, just on a very fundamental level. It affects our outlook. It affects our worldview. It affects your mental health. It affects all those things. So you're right. Whenever we raise up the works of our own hands with technology, it's and we rely on it and we see it. And again, we're worshipful creatures. If you surround yourself with these things, then whether you like it or not, you'll probably end up worshiping. Because I think worship is a lot more subtle than just writing songs to this microphone or something, right? But yeah, that's what happens. It's a result of that. And I think whenever at Babel, when God says, okay, we got to get these guys out of here, because that's exactly what they started to do. And it's in our spreading out and surrounding ourselves with the works of the Lord. That's super important.
Amen. Absolutely. It's funny. One of our experts along the way is a guy by the name of Putty Putman, who is just a remarkable guy. But Doug, you introduced us, as a matter of fact, right?
Yeah, he was on our Paranormal when we talked about quantum mechanics, I think.
Yeah.
Oh,
And
I listened to every one of those. Those are great.
Yep.
the guy has a he has a degree in quantum physics. Quantum mechanics.
Yeah.
He's a PhD, you know, and he left his career in that to go be a pastor, you know, and he has a lot. You remind me of him a lot, actually. He some of his stories are just mind blowing about the manifestations that happen. And the cool thing about him is he is such an educated guy, man. I mean, you know, like the naysayers, the scoffers, they really
Can't
don't
hold
have
a
much
candle
to
to his
point.
credentials. No.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Yeah. So maybe we should have you back and see if we can rope him into the conversation
Oh
too.
man, that'd be awesome.
That'd be really cool.
That'd be awesome.
But
We'll have to preface it with your black-eyed adult story.
Oh yeah. You want me to do that now, or
absolutely.
How long does that story take you
it's
to
not
tell?
long. It won't be long. So
But yeah, tell it now, and then we'll have you back on. Tell it again in a better way.
Reprise it.
Right. So I'm trying to think. So our whole family has intersected that world in different places. My dad saw like a Sasquatch back in the 70s, and when he was in the Everglades.
Is he still alive? Is your dad still alive?
He is. He's in Okinawa though, so you probably wouldn't be able to get him on.
Yeah,
but
for sure.
My mom's, yeah, she's had all kind of ones, but me and her experienced this whole black-eyed adult whenever I was about 13 years old or so. And then my daughter, she saw, we were in Georgia, and she saw this ghost just standing in the middle of the room, and in our house we were staying at, right next to Lake Lanier. And apparently the same one was spotted elsewhere. So that we have like so many of events have happened. But as far as the black-eyed adult, so me and my mom were in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and we were in this little shopping plaza. This is probably 1988 or 89, and I wanted to go into Radio Shack because I'm a big nerd, and so she let me go in there, and she went down to go look at clothes that was right next door in this other store. And in between the store, her store and the one I was in, there's this like movie theater. So they had a large opening where you would have to walk across in order to get, to the other side. And she was in the store just, looking at things, and then suddenly she got this foreboding sense of dread, and she's like, and the Lord said, go find Malachi. And then she starts panicking. It's like, well, where is he? Well, he's where you told him to be. And so she walks across, and she sees this man hunched down, sitting down, and he has like a sombrero and a poncho on. And he just seemed really, really off to her. He just really bizarre. And so she walks past, and she looks, and he has these just black eyes, like darker than black. And it freaks her out. She walks over calmly, gets me, and she says, "You got to see this." And so we get in our car, because we're not about to go walk by this guy again. We get in our car, and we see a bunch of police officers, like a bunch of squad cars, about 3 or 4 of them, and they're all like situated around the front of that theater. And she's like, watch this. So she starts slow rolling by so we can rubberneck and see everything that's going on. And you see these cops, and they're just shaking in their boots. Their weapons are drawn, and they have this bullhorn, and they say, "Sir, there's no loitering," right? So the fact that they have their weapons drawn for some guy who's just guilty of loitering is bizarre in itself. But these guys are visibly shaken. So they were catching whatever vibe I guess my mom was. And so this man, he stands up, and he's got to be at least 7.5, 8 feet tall. And this poncho, it was super long, and he just kind of goes around, and I could see him, and his eyes, it just looked like sockets. It's just black. And he starts walking, and he goes around the corner of the building, and me and her go to follow him, and he's just gone. I mean, and there's nowhere for him to go. Like he's just disappears out of thin air. That was strange. That was very strange.
You
Very strange
think?
day.
Yeah.
I don't think we ever frequented that place again. But I don't know what that was. I couldn't tell
Well,
you.
what was the cops' reaction? What the cops do?
They just made sure he left. I imagine the owners of the theater are like, you got to get this dude out of here. You know, he's turning away guests. You know.
Yeah.
But when they showed up, I guess the first guy was like, yeah, I'm out of my league. I need some backup on this. And who knows? I would love to have seen the whole thing, but that's the part I saw, and it's pretty interesting. To say the least.
Yeah.
I think I first heard about that story. I don't remember why the black-eyed children thing came up, but we were talking about it one day.
I think there was a flap of those things going around.
Yeah,
and we got to start talking to them. It's like, hey, by the way, I don't know about kids, but I got this really tall creature, you know, and his skin was super dark too. It was just really, really creepy, really off.
Dark like what?
Not
like a dark black man from Africa, or dark?
No. So his features were Hispanic, and that could just be my memory. You know, he was wearing a sombrero and a poncho.
Yeah.
Right. But I do remember his skin was dark. But the reason why I pointed that out is because his eyes weren't dark because of contrast. They were black. Like it wasn't because just of he was light skinned, but he was a really dark skinned, and his eyes were so much darker than his skin. Yeah.
Wow.
I guess the thing to say is that if two little children, black guys, come to your door, don't let them in. But if some 7 foot,
don't do it.
6 guy in a sombrero with black eyes comes to your door, don't let him in either.
Yeah. Turn him away. Right. Yeah.
Or meet him at the end of the driveway.
This has been super fun, man. And you know, one of the reasons that I was so glad that we hooked up last week to have you on is because this is just emblematic to me of the kind of discussions that I have all the time with people, and I don't know that a lot of people have. You can take something fun like talking about a demon story, and then turn it in a way that is, I think, the way that's Christ honoring, and helps us go deeper in our faith. Talking about his church and talking about people coming to know the Lord, and you know, one of my goals and dreams for this podcast is to be able to just help people to experience that and see what it's like to be able to do that. So yeah, I'm really just super glad to have you on and tell those stories. And I would love to have you back on this thing.
Absolutely. Anytime.
Especially because you have a million more stories that you can tell.
Yeah. Well, put them down in order of awe and shock. What is it? Shock and awe.
Yeah.
Shock and awe, right.
How to rate those, right? Yeah. Well, thanks for having me, guys. This is super fun.
Is there anything you want to promote or tell us about, or anything you like us to
Back Bay Church. If anybody's ever in the Mississippi Gulf Coast, come look us up, have some fun. So backbaychurch.com, I believe, is our URL, but you may have to Google it. So
spell it. We will definitely do that
for people.
Right.
Spell it out for people.
Oh, back, BACK, Bay, BAY, and then church,
Back Bay.
CHUR. And our claim to fame is we are the I think they were. I don't know if I think we were the first church to accept crypto.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we were on our lead pastor. He was on Fox News and being interviewed on it. It was pretty cool.
Funny.
Yeah.
Crypto offering.
There's another whole show right there.
That's right.
But you know, at that point, you could say, you know, hey, listen, by the market last week, I gave more than you're counting.
That's right.
So, when your offering crashes because of the market, you know?
Right? The widow's mite could turn into thousands of dollars. You know.
Exactly. I tithe in Doge.
Right.
Well, Malachi, we thank you for coming on the show, and it has just been awesome. It's been an honor. It's been so much fun to catch up with you again.
Definitely.
And we look forward to having you back on the show
Yep.
sometime in the near
Yep.
future. So thank
Awesome,
you all
guys.
for listening to our little program, our little podcast here, Giant Steps. And we would really love it if you like the show, you like the content that we're giving you, that you would just follow us on social media, do all the things that you're supposed to do with the like button and all that kind of stuff, and
And to subscribe.
and subscribe. Yep, subscribe to it, and those things help all the algorithms and the stuff that's important for helping us to get this information out to other people. So thanks, and we will see you again next time.